Who are the best midfielders in FPL? I've looked at all the stats, done all the research so that you don't have to. Now, obviously, the most useful stat to have a look at to begin with is the goals scored and the expected data behind those top players. So, Son is the top scoring midfielder in FPL at the moment. He scored 6 goals, albeit only from 3.2 expected goals. The thing is with Heung-min Son, throughout his career, he's been known to exceed his expected underlying numbers. So, yes, whilst the expected data is not as good as the actual data, I do expect that trend to continue. It just shows what an elite finisher he is. Salah, he's got 5 goals from 5.2 expected goals. Bowen, 5 goals from 3.7. Hwang Hee-chan of Wolves, he definitely looks like he's overperforming his data at the moment. He is the second top scoring, well, joint second top scoring midfielder in the game at the moment with 5 goals, but only from 1.2 XG. So I think when the difference is that big, you can only reasonably assume that, well, that form's not going to continue. So if you're looking at Hwang, maybe he's not the best option because obviously he's massively overperforming those stats. Salah and Mbeumo both on 4 goals, basically performing in line with their expected data. In terms of 3 goals, there are loads of players, so I couldn't include them all on the slide with loads of detail. We've got Odegaard, Douglas Luiz, Jensen of Brentford, Solly March, Matoma, Sterling and Doucouré from Everton. Now, the next best thing to a goal in FPL is, of course, assists. Now, the top 5 assisters in the Premier League midfield so far are here. We've got Pedro Neto in number 1, 6 assists from only 2.3 expected assists. We're finding across the league at the moment, when I've looked at these stats, is players are significantly overperforming their expected assists. Expected goals, most players are there or thereabout, but expected assists, there is a lot of overperformance at the moment, and that might be sort of unintentional passes or blocks or, you know, deflections, etc., earning players assists, and of course maybe shots that get deflected as well or bounce off the keeper, post, etc. So we're seeing a lot of overperformance basically of expected assists. Neto top, as I said. Maddison on 5 assists from 2.9 expected. Diaby on 4. Salah also on 4. 5 goals and 4 assists for Salah so far this season. Gordon on 4 assists as well. I really like Anthony Gordon at his price. Most of these guys, as I said, overperforming the data. 3 assists. There's plenty of players there, so I couldn't include them all in detail. We've got Fabio Vieira of Arsenal, Saka, Billy Gilmore, Mitoma, Sterling, Foden, and James Ward-Prowse. Another stat I like to look at is combining the expected goals and expected assists to see the expected goal involvement. This is basically the underlying data to show how dangerous or not these midfielders are. It doesn't obviously take into account actual returns, but it shows how much they're either creating or how many chances they're getting. Salah is leading the way, 8 expected returns so far this season. Per 90 minutes, that's over 1 return basically. So you can assume based on that underlying data that every game Salah plays, you can almost expect him to get a return in. It's a similar story with Bukayo Saka, 6.44 expected goal involvement, 0.94 expected returns per 90. We've got Mbeumo, Fernandes, Maddison, Son, Bowen, Doucouré again. It's quite interesting to see Doucouré so high up on the list, but he is given, you know, quite a lot of attacking responsibility, and Eze of Crystal Palace rounds it out. Something we couldn't cover when talking about defenders, but something that I think is quite important when picking your midfielders, particularly as the Premier League has gone so far this season, with the amount of penalties for dodgy handballs or tackles, etc., that have been awarded, and VAR not being particularly reliable and probably over-rewarding some penalties. It's important to know who takes the penalties, isn't it? And with the defender video, there aren't really any defender penalty takers, but the midfield is absolutely full of them in the Premier League. So the Arsenal penalty taker, this one's a little bit tricky. Saka, I think, is the designated taker. However, he can be giving away, well, he's already been seen to give away a number of his penalties to the likes of Odegaard. Got a feeling one could go to Martinelli at some point, so he's a bit of a tricky one, but he has taken a couple of penalties this season. Douglas Luiz is the Aston Villa penalty taker. He's an interesting option because, of course, playing in the deep line midfield position he usually does means he's probably not going to get too much involved of like non-penalty goals and assists, but he does take the penalties and has accumulated 3 goals so far this season as a result. And Mbeumo for Brentford, he obviously takes the penalties in the absence of Ivan Toney. Chelsea's quite an interesting one. Obviously, we all know that Cole Palmer took the last one, Enzo Fernandez took the one before that, and I have a sneaking feeling that Sterling could well be taking them as well. I don't think there's a settled 100% penalty taker for Chelsea at the moment. I think if they get another one and Palmer takes it, I think that solidifies his, spot as the penalty taker. Eze, of course, the penalty taker for Palace. Andreas Pereira for Fulham. We all know Salah and Fernandes for Liverpool and United. Gibbs-White takes the penalties for Forest. You're not really going to pick him, but Norwood takes the pens for Sheffield United. Son for Spurs. Benrahma, when he's on the pitch, seems to be the penalty taker for West Ham, but with the signings that they've made, he doesn't really seem to be getting in the starting 11 at the moment, so the penalties have been going to Lucas Paquetá. And then to round off the midfielders, we've got the top point scorers. Regardless of price, Salah comes out on top. He's the most expensive midfielder in the game, and you're kind of getting what you pay for at the moment. 5 points above Son in first place with 59. Then, of course, we've got Son on 54, Saka on 53, Bowen on 50, Maddison on 47, Jensen, Odegaard and Sterling all on 46, and Pedro Neto on 43. Interesting to see a player under 6 million coming out on the top point scorer list. Pedro Neto is a really nice option in my opinion. Plays every game for Wolves, pretty much plays 90 minutes as well. It's super duper cheap. I think he's a really nice option. Now, what I've done with the previous videos is I've recommended 3 players from each position that I think are the best option. Unfortunately, with the midfield, there are just so many players to choose from. I can't really round down 3 of my favourites. You could pick any player that I've spoken about in this video, depending on the budget you've got available, etc., etc., and they'll be fine in your team. The top goal scorers, the top assisters, the top players for underlying numbers, the penalty takers, all of those things are things to take into account when picking your team. So I'm not going to come to any conclusions in this particular video, but I'm hoping it gives you enough information to maybe draw your own. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a like rating, subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there. Stick around for my next video, which of course is going to be to round off this little international break series, and I'll talk about the best forwards.